Dust and smoke blurred the narrow alleys of the shattered village outside Raqqa, Syria. Walls half-standing, rebar twisted like wire brush. The air cracked with small arms fire. The Joint Recon Unit, 2 SEAL squads and a handful of special forces, had moved in fast, confident. Too confident. Someone screwed the map. Intel said light presence. But ISIS was dug in deep, waiting. A sniper round pinged off a nearby wall. Another cracked into a SEAL's plate, and then came the mortars, thudding, deliberate, walking in tight and purposeful like they'd practiced this exact kill box. Specialist Avery Quinn was 3 buildings over, perched in the half-collapsed husk of what once passed for a second story, her rifle leveled through a jagged hole in the concrete. She'd been watching the northern approach when the ground shook. The wall behind her erupted. She barely had time to register the sound before the floor gave out and her body slammed against debris on the level below, ribs crunching against the shattered bricks. Dust choked her lungs. Blood trickled into her eye. Her comms crackled with panic and retreat orders. A SEAL yelled something about friendly KIA. Then came the voice that would haunt her long after the bruises faded. "She's done for," Lieutenant Langston muttered. Flat. Final. Not even a question. Just a checkbox in his head. Ticked. No one challenged it. No one paused. Within minutes, the team was pulling back, ducking through alleyways, dropping smoke, dragging one wounded. But not her. Not even a glance over the shoulder. Under the collapsed ceiling, buried in ash and splinters, Avery blinked through the pain, half-conscious. Her rifle was gone. Her left arm, maybe broken. Her legs worked, barely. She didn't scream. Didn't beg. Just listened to the comms go silent as her team disappeared from the AO. She pulled herself forward inch by inch, lips dry, every breath a knife. Her hand found the edge of a door frame, and she hauled herself into a shadowed crevice beneath twisted metal. She stayed low, heart thudding in sync with the distant rattle of gunfire. No rescue call. No drone pass. Nothing. They had written her off. But Specialist Avery Quinn wasn't done for. She was alive, and she was listening. And somewhere out there, the men who left her behind were still walking toward a second ambush they hadn't seen coming. Yet, 6 months earlier, the Georgia heat shimmered off the tarmac at Fort Benning, blurring the outlines of the base like a mirage. Inside the sniper range facility, a row of seasoned candidates waited for their turn to qualify, most of them loud, cocky, exchanging banter about win calls and past deployments like baseball stats. Avery Quinn sat apart, not brooding, not shy, just focused. She adjusted the sling on her rifle, double-checked her dope, and waited. Her shot grouping was a tight cluster the size of a silver dollar at 1,000 meters. No celebration, no comment, just a quiet nod to the range officer and a walk back to the bleachers. One of the instructors, a grizzled ranger vet named Hardin, muttered under his breath, "That one's surgical." But it didn't travel far. Quinn had already done her time. Philippines, jungle warfare, ghosting insurgents through mud and silence. Somalia too, where her Overwatch call saved a convoy from an IED ambush. 2 medals. No speeches. No Instagram. She never wore her credentials like armor. In a world of loud uniforms and louder personalities that made her invisible. To the men around her, mostly Alpha T operators, she was a curiosity they couldn't peg. She didn't party, didn't trash talk, didn't care about proving anything. That unsettled them more than it should have. They joked behind her back. Nothing openly cruel, just that snide, tight-throated banter that cuts deeper than slares. Sniper Barbie, Lieutenant Brad Langston chuckled one day, loud enough for half the barracks to hear. He was fresh from OCS, sharp jaw, louder voice, all swagger and unearned authority. His file was clean. His field time? Thin. But he had the tone, the presence. Officers noticed him. He noticed himself even more. Avery heard it. Didn't blink. Just folded her laundry and left the room. At mission briefings, her voice was flat, precise, offering movement patterns, elevation advantage estimates, fallback ranges. Sometimes, a more seasoned NCO would nod, take a note. But Langston, he'd interrupt, pivot, overlook. One time, She called out a blind spot in the route plan. He waved it off, saying they'd adapt on the fly. She didn't push. That was the thing about Quinn. She didn't waste energy trying to be heard by people who'd already decided not to listen. On base, she ate alone. In the rec tent, she read military memoirs instead of watching UFC fights. If she was bitter, no one saw it. She ran the obstacle course faster than half the squad. Hit bullseyes the others couldn't touch. But she didn't brag, didn't banter, didn't play the part. So when the Syria deployment rolled around, no one objected to her assignment, but no one had her back either. She was good enough to include, not valuable enough to respect, until everything went sideways. And the sniper Barbie they forgot turned out to be the one name they should have remembered. Back at the forward operating base, the mood was a cocktail of exhaustion and silence, not grief. The kind of silence people adopt when pretending something didn't happen. The team had returned under cover of dusk, dragging dust and sweat into the debrief room. No one mentioned Quinn by name. A few sideways glances. One SEAL muttered that the wall just came down too fast. A medic, still pulling off bloody gloves, said something about probably instant. And that was it. No body, no confirmation, no urgency, just a shrug of finality, like a light flicked off. Lieutenant Langston sat at the end of a folding table, sleeves rolled, typing up a casualty notation into the mission log. No emotion, just bureaucratic muscle memory. Presumed KIA, Specialist Avery Quinn, due to structural collapse following indirect fire. He hesitated for half a beat, then tapped enter. The log closed. Across the base, life moved on. But 3 clicks north, in a pocket of hell they'd left behind, Avery Quinn wasn't dead. She was bleeding, barely conscious, curled beneath the twisted belly of a burnt-out scooter truck. Her vest was half-shredded. Her left arm hung limp, wrist swelling like a balloon. But her eyes stayed clear. Alert. She had managed to drag herself out of the collapsed building by sheer will and muscle memory, stitching together consciousness in fragments. Her side hurt with every breath, but she'd found a shard of her scope, cracked but usable, and salvaged a battered M4 from a fallen insurgent. It wasn't her rifle, but it would do. Rags from a child's discarded tunic wrapped her wounds. She'd lost her radio, then found another, an old field unit buried in the rubble. No MIC, barely enough range, but she'd rewired half of it with a bent nail and a strip of copper wire pulled from a wall. That night, the comm shack at the FOB was half empty, manned by one low-ranking tech just trying to stay awake. He leaned back, fiddling with the dials, more out of boredom than duty, until static snapped into a pattern. A broken hum, a frequency no one was supposed to be on. Then, just once, just barely, a voice. Foxtrot, 2, tracking hostiles, grid ref. The operator sat up straight, leaned in, boosted the signal. Quinn, alive? Repeat. Quinn. He stumbled out of the room, headset trailing. But by the time Langston heard, he waved it off. Ghost signal. Could be chatter spoofing. We're not mounting a recovery alt based on a maybe. The operator protested, but Langston shut it down with a glare. Meanwhile, in that crater of broken stone and burning trash, Avery wasn't waiting for anyone. She was watching, counting, recording movements, timing their patterns, tracking patrols with cold, soldier's eyes. And she knew something no one back at base had figured out yet. The enemy wasn't retreating. They were regrouping, fast, and the next patrol headed out tomorrow morning was walking straight into it. The wind cut through the ruins like a whisper of knives as Avery pushed herself forward, one foot dragging behind the other, her breath shallow, teeth clenched. Midnight cloaked the landscape in shadow, but her eyes had adjusted long ago. Pain flared with every step, but she didn't slow. There would be no medevac, no QRF. The only person coming to save the SEALs now was her. She knew the terrain better than anyone on the op, had studied the satellite overlays, had walked it twice. The collapsed village funneled movement toward a narrow corridor, the perfect place for a kill box if someone knew how to use it. And Avery could see, in her mind's eye, how ISIS was setting it up. 3 mortar pits disguised with broken crates, 2 pickup trucks with mounted DSHKs, and a hidden sniper nest perched in a blown-out minaret. She had 5 mags, 2 grenades, a captured M4 she didn't trust, and a sniper kit she rebuilt from parts. Scope cracked, 0 off by half a degree. But she had angles. She had brains. She had time, barely. Bio 130. She climbed a ridge overlooking the first mortar nest. Wind from the north. Slight uphill. She adjusted for drift. Exhaled. 1 round. Sent a mass to the spotter's chest. He dropped like a stone. She shifted. 2nd round through the barrel support bracket of the DSHK pickup, locking it useless. By the time the gunner reacted, she was already moving, crawling over broken bricks, her back slick with sweat and blood. She reached her 2nd vantage by 02:15. Saw the patrol in the distance, silhouettes moving in staggered formation. The SEALs, headed straight for the ambush zone. Her fingers worked fast. She rewired the field radio again, boosting the range with a discarded comms antenna. Static howled in her ears, then settled. She tuned to the last known squad frequency. Nothing. She tried again. Finally, a faint thread of voices broke through. Contact east. Maybe. Wait. Movement. She keyed the MIC Foxtrot Patrol. Stand by. You're walking into a trap. Mortars at grid 5541. 2 pickups flanking east wall. Eyes on enemy sniper. Coordinates incoming. Silence. Then a voice, confused, sharp. Langston. Who is this? Her reply was calm. I see. The tone of someone who didn't care if he believed her anymore. This is Quinn. Another beat of silence. Then her voice again, clipped and surgical. Minaret window. 3rd floor. Angle 62. Sniper prepping shot. At that moment, the SEAL Recon lead, Senior Chief Mora, didn't wait. He gave a quiet hand signal. They dropped. Redirected. The whole team moved like water, because someone was guiding them who knew how to see. Quinn called ranges, wind, thermal blooms. 2nd pickup, tire shot will stop rotation. She took it herself. 1 shot. Boom. Tire shredded, vehicle disabled. Mortar nest. Engage left side only. Ammo cache is exposed. They did. She cleared the kill zone piece by piece, her voice steady, low, authoritative. Every target she marked fell. Every call she made saved a life. By 0430, the field was silent. Smoke curled up from smoldering trucks. The SEALs held the high ground. No one dead. No one missing. They still didn't know where she was. Until she stepped out of the dark. Limping. Rifle slung. Dust in her hair. Blood down her arm. And every man there, Langston included, turned and stared at the woman they'd left for dead, now standing at the center of their survival. Not yelling. Not smiling. Just standing. Still watching. Still ready. And for the first time since she'd joined the team, no one said a word. The sun bled through the khaki fabric of the debrief tent, casting everything in that washed-out beige that made faces look more tired than they were. The SEALs sat in their usual loose formation, shirts damp, boots streaked with ash, hands gripping paper coffee cups they hadn't touched. No one spoke much. The morning heat hadn't burned off the weight of the night before. They were all alive. That should have been cause for celebration. But every man in that tent knew they hadn't walked out of that kill zone because of good luck or perfect planning. They'd been led, quietly, precisely, by a voice they'd written off. Quinn arrived just before 0800. No ceremony, no escort. She walked in on her own, limping, sunburned, a dried trail of blood down her temple, rifle slung diagonally across her chest like it had never left her side. The medics spotted her and rushed, but she waved them off with a quiet nod. She wasn't ignoring them. She just wasn't finished yet. As she stepped through the flap, the room didn't erupt. It quieted. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Every chair turned. Even Mora, the one who trusted her voice first, straightened. She walked with that same silent discipline she'd carried through every briefing they'd ignored. But now they looked. Really looked. She's Saturday. Not at the edge this time. Front row. Right across from Langston. The young lieutenant shifted, cleared his throat, tried to find his usual command tone. but the words caught halfway up his neck. He couldn't meet her eyes. Then the tent flap opened again. A new figure stepped in, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair beneath a soft cap bearing a faded eagle insignia. Colonel Darius Nolan, Special Operations Group. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just walked straight to the center table and picked up the after-action report. He flipped once, twice, then stopped. Quinn. She stood, slow and steady. The colonel's gaze dropped to her rifle hand, resting at her side. He saw the faint etching on her sniper badge, barely visible under grime and scarring. But he knew it. Everyone in his circle did. Tier 1, Ghost Strike. His expression didn't change, but he stepped forward. And then, in the silence of that tent filled with warriors, he did something no one expected. He saluted. A full, deliberate, officer's salute. Quinn blinked. Once. Didn't move. Didn't return it. Not out of disrespect. Just a quiet refusal to make a moment of it. Langston started to stand, words tumbling toward apology or justification. Who knows what. But the colonel cut him off with a look. She's the reason your team's breathing, he said flatly. And from what I read, she was the only one in the field acting like it. Then he turned to Quinn. We've been watching Ghost Strike operators disappear for years. Didn't think one of you would show back up in Syria. Quinn gave a tired nod. Didn't plan to. Just couldn't stay quiet. And with that, the balance of the room shifted. The men who once laughed, doubted, whispered, now sat in silence, not because they were scolded, but because truth had walked in, bleeding and unshaken. There was no speech, no standing ovation, just stillness. And in that stillness, respect finally found its rightful place. The museum wasn't large. Just a single hall tucked behind a retired airfield outside Fayetteville, its walls lined with names. Boots, medals, some stories told in glass and shadow, others barely whispered in brass. Near the back of the room, past the drone exhibit and next to a scorched MRE heater pulled from Fallujah, sat a new edition. A cracked sniper scope, the glass spiderwebbed, still flecked with desert dust. Beneath it, a small placard, handwritten in careful block letters, "Don't count her out." People drifted past it quietly, like the words had weight they didn't want to disturb. A couple of young female recruits in dress blues paused longer than the others. One nudged the other gently, whispered something about the Syria op, about the voice on the comms that saved an entire squad. They didn't know every detail, but they'd heard enough. In the back row, Avery Quinn stood with her hands folded, wearing a pressed civilian jacket and jeans. No ribbons, no ceremony uniform. She hadn't wanted a spotlight, but Colonel Nolan had called personally, said it wasn't about the medal, it was about the record, making it real. Langston was there, too, posted now to a quiet logistics unit out of state. He didn't say much, just stood near the side wall, eyes steady, jaw tight, not out of anger, but something closer to shame that had slowly settled into understanding. The colonel stepped up to the front. No speech, just a box. For valor beyond doctrine, he read from the citation. For seeing what others missed. For refusing to let silence be your legacy. He handed it to her. Avery turned the plaque in her hand slowly, her eyes resting not on the inscription, but on the faces in the crowd. The ones who'd come, the ones who'd listened. She nodded, not to accept anything, but to acknowledge that this chapter was done. Not erased, not rewritten, just settled. Outside, the flag was lowered to half-staff for another fallen team from another war. The wind caught it just enough to lift it briefly toward the sky. And in the final voice of the story, they said she was done for, but she walked out of hell with every soul intact. She didn't ask for a second chance. She made one. Ever served with someone quiet, who turned out to be the reason you made it home? Let us know where you're watching from.